I've been filming and teaching workshops from this studio space for the last year and a half or so, and it's gone through a lot of changes in that time. In this video, I wanted to give you a tour of the space and show you how I use everything that's in here. I had grand plans of doing a full studio tour video showing every stage of the build out from when I converted this from a garage until what we've got now. I've got a lot of unedited footage for that video. This is not that video. Instead, what I found is that, first of all, everything keeps changing. I keep changing things up. I'm never quite happy with the way things are, and I never feel like it's done. So I've never got to a point in time where I felt like it's appropriate to publish that video. And in the meantime, I realized that around every 6 months or so, I was doing a tour of my studio on a live stream. So instead, this video is going to be a snapshot of what my studio looks like right now, and a tour of all the gear that I am using right now. And this will probably be different in another 6 months from now. It turns out I do change things up a lot as I continue to learn about how I'm using my gear and how I best want to take advantage of it. But before we get into the tour, I want to make a couple of quick notes. First of all, I'm showing you all this not to show off what I have here. I'm showing you this because I find it interesting when I watch other people's studio tours, and I know some of you have been asking for a tour of my space. Also, don't feel like you need everything I've got in here. Everything in my studio has been accumulated over quite a long period of time, some of it even before I started building this space. And one of the particular challenges of what I do on YouTube, which is teach people about live streaming, is that I actually need some extra gear on top of the things I'm actually showing in order to be able to show that gear on the stream. For example, if I want to show you the ATEM's multi-view on a live stream, I have to actually have some extra gear in order to make that work. So if you're just using an ATEM Extreme, you don't necessarily need all the extra things that I might have to do in order to be able to use it for your normal work. I also want to show you what it's like in here most of the time, so I didn't do a big cleanup job on this. This is going to be kind of messy. There's going to be cables on the floor, there's going to be gear scattered around because that's just what it's like in here. I know I really like those super pristine staged sets, and that's just not realistic, and honestly, it has never looked like that in here. So we're just gonna take what we get, and I'm gonna show you what it's like most of the time as I'm using this space. So let's get started on the actual tour. The way I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna break this up into the three sort of main areas that are in this space. This is my main filming set that I use for filming YouTube videos and also where I teach workshops from. This angle is the one I normally use for my edited videos that I put on YouTube that are things like tutorials. I also sometimes record podcasts here if I'm going to be on somebody else's video where I can kind of crop in and have less distracting stuff in the background. The third space is this sort of storage corner where I've got my cabinets and battery wall, and I've also got some pretty messy shelves over there. So we'll take a look at this as well. So to start things off, I'm going to walk you through this setup, which is again sort of my main setup. Let's start with the cameras I use for this angle. The main camera that you're seeing me through right now is the Lumix G7 with the 15mm lens. The camera is super affordable. I talk about it all the time on my live streams. I did upgrade the lens beyond the kit lens, so it is a 15mm lens, and that lens costs almost as much as the camera, but that does help contribute to why this picture looks good. The other cameras I use at this angle is this other Lumix G7 that I have usually pointing at my desk here. And that's so that I can show you what's on my desk and point at things that as I'm describing how to use different equipment. I did recently put in this little tiny RX0 camera here that's kind of attached to the table, and that way I can show you things on my desk up close, like I did in this previous live stream where I was showing the Stream Deck buttons. This one kind of floats around, and sometimes I attach it to other parts of the studio as well. And the last camera I use from this angle is this little handheld rig. This is what I've been using lately. It's my Sony ZV-1 with the Hollyland Mars 300 wireless transmitter with the battery on top. This does a pretty good job of being a nice little portable handheld thing where I can point it around and show things at my desk or show things on the other side of the room, or actually walk around with it like I will be doing for filming this video. So next, let's talk about audio. From this desk, most of the time I'm using this microphone that's on top of the table. And you can kind of see how it's on top of the monitor there, stuck out on this little arm. This is the Movo VXR10, and I got it a long time ago, and it's a surprisingly good microphone considering how cheap it is. To hear myself, I have headphones that are wired in. These are connected into the ATEM Mini Extreme that everything else is connected to. I'll explain more about that in a little bit. And that's just so I can hear myself, but it is delayed because the microphone's actually running into the camera, and then the camera's HDMI out is a couple of frames delayed, and it's just enough to be very distracting listening to myself at that delay. So I usually don't have them on when I'm filming. I also don't like the look of wearing headphones while filming. So I usually just have it on to double check the music is at the right level. And then as soon as I come on the air, I take off the headphones. So for lighting this shot, there's a couple of things going on. The two main lights in this shot are these LEDGo panels. One is up there to the left, one is over there to the right. And they are at slightly different color temperatures and slightly different brightnesses. I have the one on this side of my face set to 5600 and it's at 50% brightness. The one coming up from this side is at about 20% brightness and the color temperature is about 4200. So much warmer light coming from this side. And I feel like that kind of rounds it out a little bit and makes it look less flat. The other main light in this shot is the one behind me. That's the one shining down on top of my head. If I turn that light off, you'll see what it's doing. So it just adds a little bit of a rim light to the top of my hair and separates me from the background. That light is mounted to the ceiling. It's a GVM80W. And it is connected to my smart home system, so I can turn it on and off with a Stream Deck button. The other lights in the shot are the Aputure in the background on the shelf. Those are the two Aputure MC that DVE Store sent me, and those are set to colors that kind of match the background and the walls. The computer that I have here is the M1 Mac Mini, and that sits under my monitor, and it's connected into the rest of the system. I got it a little while ago, I will say. I've been pretty happy with it. I'm not blown away by it by any means, but it's fine, and I like having a desktop here that makes no sound and is decently fast for what I'm doing with it. I do have the Apple wireless keyboard and mouse in front of me, and those are what I use primarily for the computer. So last, what I want to talk about here is how I monitor streams and how I control things. Again, I'm primarily using this for two different use cases. So when I'm doing YouTube live streams, I'm usually showing things about live streaming. So I'm showing my multi-view and I'm showing my computer screen on the stream. When I do workshops from here, I actually want this to be my computer monitor. So I can go here, change the monitor to the computer monitor, and that way I can use this for live coding or presentations. And in that case, I will reassign this monitor to be the ATEM's multi-view. All right, so what's all the gear that actually makes this happen? Most of this set is built around the ATEM Mini Extreme. So everything is mixed into the ATEM Mini Extreme, which is how I mix the program and cut between different angles and modify the sound and things like that. I talked about this on a recent live stream, but I'll walk through the wiring diagram again quickly. This is kind of a simplified version of it. You can see here's my ATEM Mini Extreme ISO, and it's got all of my cameras plugged into it. It's also got my computer monitor plugged into it so that I can get things like this view to show you what's on my computer screen. And then I've run out of inputs to add graphics. So this actually feeds out the HDMI into the Television Studio HD. That old one that I've had for a long time that I used to use on gigs. That's the one that I used in the video where I had the whole rig on my bike and went and set up a conference shoot. Anyway, I'm glad that I'm able to find a new use for it again because it's been sitting on the shelf for quite a while now. So my ATEM Mini Extreme feeds into that, and then also it feeds into that is the Hyperdeck Studio Mini, my old one, for doing stingers and other graphics, as well as the UltraStudio 4K Mini, which is plugged into my computer so I can push graphics on top. So basically my downstream key 1 is set to these two inputs, downstream key 2 is set to these two inputs. So the Television Studio HD is really just taking the ATEM's feed and then doing two keys on top of it. That then feeds into the Web Presenter HD, which is doing the actual streaming encoding to YouTube. That also is plugged into my computer over USB. I guess I didn't draw that line from my computer, but it's a long line to draw. And that means the Web Presenter can also be a webcam for my computer if I want to actually show the same program mix with graphics in something like Zoom. And then on my desk, I have the multi-view of the ATEM Mini Extreme and the multi-view of the TV Studio HD down here. That way I can see what's going on both of them. The Web Presenter HD's monitor output, which has the stats and stuff, that's on a monitor that's up here next to my camera, so I can kind of keep an eye on the streaming status as I'm doing a show, and it's not too far out of eyesight from the camera. That's also the main way that I look at the program output, which includes the actual graphics overlays, including things like to see if a chat message is on the screen. Okay, so what else is on my desk? I've got this rack on above the ATEM Mini Extreme, and I'll talk about this one in a second, but I've got these two monitors, this SmartView Duo. It's actually Blackmagic's pretty old dual screen 7-inch. They're not HD at all. I think it's 480 lines, which is not great. It gets the job done. I like that it's rack mounted, and I can again reassign what goes into those by going into my little routing menu and then change, for example, SmartView left into a multi-view if I wanted to show the ATEM's multi-view over there. This is controlling the SDI matrix. This is kind of the magic behind the whole thing. This is what's doing all of this fancy tricks of being able to reassign monitors to different inputs and outputs. I have been Thoroughly enjoying that SDI router. Honestly, it's one of the best things I've done for this studio. Again, you probably don't need one because if you're just doing a program switching cameras between multiple angles in the ATEM Mini Extreme, but the reason I like it is because, for example, I want to show you my computer screen on the stream in a super source, and I want it in front of me in a monitor, which means I can then reassign my computer screen, which actually goes into the matrix. I can say one copy goes to this screen, one copy goes into input 2, and then I can also say one copy goes to that one. That's actually my second monitor. I can also say, instead of my main monitor in input 2, I could say that's actually gonna be my second screen instead. And that just changed into a totally different display. So again, you probably don't need that for most things, but since I reconfigured this between this setup for YouTube and my other setup for doing workshops where I need a second screen that's a lot larger so I can actually go and like drag a browser window over there, it's a lot more useful for me to be able to reassign these monitors using this matrix. Let's talk about this Stream Deck for a minute. So this is how I control most of my show. I've got my main show buttons here that do things like the pre-roll, the map, switching between different layouts, but I've also got my routing menu and I've got my streaming and encoding menu to do on air. I can control the downstream key in the TV studio. I've got a whole bunch of things set up here. This is actually connected into a Raspberry Pi that lives behind there in that rack. The Raspberry Pi connects to this over USB, and that way these buttons are always available, even if my computer is asleep. Again, it's tied into my home automation system, so I can also do things like control the lighting of the room by pressing these buttons. A couple of other things in front of me here. I recently installed 2 iPods. One is for this countdown timer website, which is just bigtimer.net. And it just is a full screen countdown timer, which is really useful on Zoom calls or in presentations. And then this one I use sometimes if I'm playing music. I can run a playlist off of here and feed music into the stream. This is connected into a microphone too. So I can play music for breaks during Zoom calls and things like that. I also actually have a Apple TV behind that rack, which is connected to input 7 right now, but again, it's all assignable. I can move it around if I wanted to. And I use that sometimes for things like screen sharing from an iPad. So I also usually have this iPad in front of me. And for this, I can use Keynote or I can use my 3D graphics program and do 3D modeling and then sharing that via AirPlay into the ATEM so I can actually show what I'm using on my iPad on the stream. The other thing that's on my desk is this sort of secondary rack of stuff hidden behind this iPad. And this is not ideal. And this is something I might be changing relatively soon. So this is where I've got the UltraStudio 4K for doing the chat overlay. This is the TV Studio HD. That one's the web presenter, and this is the new Hyperdeck Plus. This is also the new Hyperdeck Mini. And that's where the Mac lives. So this is not great. I don't like that it's sort of hidden under here. I would love for it to be in the main rack over here, but I ran out of slots. So I need to find out some solution, and I don't know exactly what that's going to be yet. So this is probably one of the things that's going to change in my setup in the near future, which is why I want to capture it, because it is working fine. It is working right now, even though it's not ideal. Most of the time that stuff's hidden by the iPad, and I don't need to really see it anyway because it's just sort of the last step of the chain. The little riser that this is on is actually really cool. I'll leave a link to that down below, but it just bumps everything up a couple inches so I can put these things and still have room for sliding more stuff under the desk here. I've also got these little 3D printed SD card trays, which are pretty cool. And that way I can just have little racks of SD cards. Like I've got my little stress test clips loaded onto these in different frame rates so I know what card is what. Then I can just like pop one of those into the Hyperdeck, play it out on the stream, and run it into various equipment around the studio. All right, what else is on my desk? I've got a couple of accessories and mounting gear. So first of all, my ATEM Mini Extreme stand that puts this ATEM at a nice angle and also means I can attach the Stream Deck next to it, which makes it nice and flush. Let me take you around to the back to show you a bit of the mess that's back there. So around the back, we've got a giant pile of wires. This is the SDI matrix. Everything's running in and out of there. Because a lot of my devices are HDMI, I do have stacks of HDMI SDI converters. And these are the bidirectional ones, which I'm mostly using in single directional mode, but there are a couple in bidirectional mode. And I actually 3D printed these little racks for them. These models are downloadable. I'll link to them down below, but they're on my website and you can download them and print them. They're not great. They were one of my first attempts at 3D printing, so they're not super solid. They're not actually attached to anything, but it looks cool. They just kind of set in there, and it means you can stack them and not waste all the floor space. I have these little Anchor USB power supplies, which do a great job of powering all of those. And then down here, I've got some other devices. I've got my network switch, which is now actually full. I've got the Raspberry Pi for the Stream Deck. I've got the Apple TV over there. I've got a couple other things. This is a H.264 encoder. This one's the streaming bridge. There's another H.264 encoder or decoder here. Kind of a mess back here, but you know, it's what you do. Honestly, if I didn't change my studio around so much, I would actually care a lot more about cable management and actually try to make this look good. As far as the actual furniture here, this desk is the Flexi Spot desk that they sent me, and I did a live stream about it back in December. And it's been great. It's super solid. And then everything around the back is attached via this Wally arm. So that runs down to the desk, bolts onto the desk. Everything is attached here. So you can see we've got these little arms bolted to it. This one is for the monitor. This one is for the camera. This one goes to the other monitor. And then I've actually got the light bolted to that arm. And the last thing attached up here is I've got my 7-inch Blackmagic display there clamped on, but then I've also got this arm for the microphone, this is not a microphone arm. This is actually like meant to be vertical for a tabletop tripod, but it clamps on, it works, it does the job, and it is very strong. It's very solid. It's way overkill for the tiny microphone out there. Again, cable management, not happening. And the lights that I'm using, one is bolted to the table and the other one is bolted to this arm because otherwise it would not be tall enough to reach. Last bit of lighting for the desk is this GVM50RS. They sent me that one a long time ago, last summer at some point. And this is the RGB light, which I use to illuminate my gray wall to turn it into colors. And that's the background you see in most of my YouTube videos. Okay, anything else? Oh, the stool I'm sitting on. I like a stool here because I don't want a back visible in the shot. So I just use an office stool and it's been working great. Oh, I also have a UPS on the floor. The UPS does its job. It is powering everything on the desk, and I have actually tested it live by pulling the cord out of the wall on a stream, and everything stays up. All right, let's move over to this set. So this camera that you're looking at me on right now, this is the Blackmagic Pocket 4K. I bought this one last summer, and it's been working great. I do have a LUT that I created for this camera that makes it look very close to the Lumix G7. It's not perfect, but it's very close. And this feeds into the whole same system, and it's going into the ATEM right now, and that's how I'm recording this program. I have a couple of other cameras that I sometimes use here. Again, I'll have a handheld rig that I'll use, but I can also take this camera and just spin it around this pole and point it at the table and get another angle that way as well. Sometimes I also take my little small camera and move it over to the side over there or in front and get a second angle that way. The Pocket 4K camera is sitting behind this teleprompter. This is the Glide Gear TMP100 classic teleprompter. It is the Lilliput A11 10-inch monitor below it, and it does a pretty good job of being, as you can see, nice and bright and almost exactly the right size for that teleprompter. So I like that a lot. And again, because that monitor is connected into my SDI matrix, it means that I can choose what to show on that monitor. It doesn't have to be the multi-view. For example, if I was in a Zoom call, I could make that my computer monitor instead, and now it's my secondary computer monitor where I could see the Zoom guest. But for this, I want it to be my multi-view. For the audio at this setup, I have a Zoom F6 recorder. It kind of hangs out on the corner of the table. I use this Samson C02. That is positioned at about the same spot above me compared to the other microphone at the desk. This one goes into that Zoom interface. I can record on the Zoom interface, or I can also record in the camera, which I'm doing right now. So there is an audio cable going from the F6 into the camera, and then the audio matches that way back into the ATEM. And that's what you're hearing right now. For the lighting, I've got one light over to the side of me. So again, you can kind of see the position there. That light is the Godox SL150 II. It is very quiet. There's a slight fan noise, but it does a pretty good job of being quiet. It doesn't heat up too much, and it's getting a little bit warm in here right now. That light is doing most of the work here, and then the other light I've got in this shot is actually this little light attached to my same arm that my microphone is on, which is the little Falcon Eyes F7. And if I turn that off, you'll see what a difference this makes having this on. I think it helps. It is battery power, but it lasts quite a long time. I should mention this arm. So I've got my microphone connected up here, but it's also got this overhead camera. So I've got this little boom arm attached to this 3-wheeled C stand, which holds the microphone, the light, and the camera all attached to that. Overhead camera is this one, so I can show you stuff on the table as well. I do need to move it because this iPad is reflecting that light. There we go. I'm not often using a computer at this table because I'm mostly going to be doing things like just talking to the camera or showing new gear that I'm testing out, but I actually can use my computer from here as well. I have a second set of a keyboard and mouse connected to the same computer, and again, because that computer monitor is not just a monitor, it's going into my SDI matrix, I actually send a second copy of it over to here. So this monitor at the table here, I can see, and it's a 27-inch Dell, super cheap, not the fanciest monitor in the world, but it gets the job done. And that's just under my light. Let me take you around the back of that to show you how those two are connected. So around the back, you can see I'm again using a 3-wheeled C stand to hold those up. I've got the light is on the stand normally, and then I've got this little clamp. This clamp has this little extension out to this adapter for the monitor. This is a VESA adapter for the little peg that the light stands are. And it's stressed. It's probably at its limit, but it's holding strong and it hasn't caused any problems yet. While I'm back here, I can show you the camera, this camera from this side. This is the Pocket 4K in the teleprompter. And I've actually got the Lumix 12-35 on there right now. And I don't normally change the zoom much, but I do sometimes switch between full wide like this, or I'll crop in a little bit and make it look more like that. So I do take advantage of the fact that it's a zoom lens, I guess. Like I said, things are a little bit of a mess. One of my favorite features of this setup is actually what's under the table. And that is how I've got all of my cables wired up. So over on that desk is where the SDI matrix lives, which means I need to get cables for all of the cameras and monitors over there somehow. So here's what I did. From the giant pile of spaghetti, I've actually got one neat little tiny snake that wraps up a whole bunch of SDI cables in an Ethernet and comes into this little breakout box. This is a little box I built from scraps of wood that I got from Amazon, but let me show you what's inside. So each of these are HDMI or SDI ports, and they're all labeled. I did actually a decent job labeling them. These are all things that run over to the matrix. So the number is the matrix, so this will be like SDI 14 out. G is the actual label for the cable itself, so the wires are labeled letters. And if I pop this open, it's just stuck on with magnets. You can see the giant mess of stuff inside. Here my cables labeled with little letters, but then it's actually a whole pile of SDI converters in there. I actually used the Decimator MD-HX scaler to scale for the computer monitor. Anyway, it's a mess in there. It's a little bit warm too, but it's not too bad. And there's a network switch and also a power supply in there as well. And then most of the time I just leave it covered. The door just kind of attaches with the magnets. And then I get quick access to things up here. So I can just quickly plug in HDMI or SDI sources to test things out, or plug in network gear, things like that. Again, that comes in really handy because a lot of times what I'm doing here is doing things like testing gear. So I'll have an extra ATEM mini, or I'll have a YoloBox or something that I'm trying out and demoing or doing a tutorial about. And I need video feeds into that device for testing. So I'll send copies of my cameras into those ports from my SDI matrix, feed them into the devices so I can get this shot in that device as well as recorded in my main ATEM. All right, so that's about it for the two sets. Last thing I want to talk about is the rest of the space. What else is in the room? So for that, I'm going to take you on a little trip to the other end of the room and we'll go from there. This is something I'm starting to get really happy with. This is the wall control pegboard system. And these are little brackets I've been 3D printing to hold my various battery chargers to the pegboard. So these are just little slots for these things to slide into. They're all custom fit to exactly fit these particular chargers that I happen to have. And it's great. I like being able to 3D print stuff that really only I'm going to use because these chargers are so random. But it's great. It means I can have all my batteries attached to the wall. I still need to work on this situation. This is a bit of a mess. I need some better storage for these. I'll probably make little shelves for the wall as well. But overall, that's been working very well because it's a lot easier to just pop a battery on there, take it off of the wall when you're done. I do need to make a little hanger for my GoPro to charge as well. So also over here, I've got my storage shelves, which some of them are organized, some of them are not. Some of them are a bit of a mess. These ones are organized, so I will show you these ones. I've got Ethernet, I've got USB, I've got HDMI cables, and the last one is SDI, which is getting empty because a lot of my SDI cables are tied up now. The rest of these are not super well organized at the moment, so we will just not look inside of those. But it's great to be able to hide stuff away and then have it still look decent in here. I also have this little mirror because it turns out it is useful to be able to see myself before I go live and double check that I don't have anything like on my face. Now let's go over to the sort of corner of shame. This is where I store boxes and things that I don't access very often. It is a little bit of a disaster. There's also some just boxes on the floor now. So I need to do some work here, but in the meantime, at least the stuff is out of the way. This drawer is semi-organized. It is mostly full of screws and nuts and bolts of various sizes that I've been using for 3D printing. All the little tools, little rubber feet, more screws. So other than that, this is where a lot of the gear that I don't use every day lives. Also, okay, let's talk about sound panels. So you see my pile of extra ones. Let me tell you what happened. So ages ago, when I started building this space out, it was just an empty garage, which meant that there was nothing anywhere. It was just an empty box. And I needed to start using it quickly because I was teaching. I was doing things in the space and I could not put it off any longer. So I was like, well, I need to start teaching tomorrow. So I just need to get some sound panels. And I got those things that everybody has and then just started hanging them in places and just putting them around the space, and it worked okay. Then later is when I developed this sort of theme. Angled stripes across the walls, the cool ceiling lights, and the colors. And those do not match, and I'm not super happy about them. It's one of the only things that's not bright now. So I still have them. I don't want to throw them all out, so I started hanging them around the room also at a 45-degree angle instead of as squares. So it's something, I'm not super happy with it. These ones I do like. These are this cool hex pattern. I've got that tiled up over the doorway, and that way it actually looks kind of cool. It's a pattern that actually is relevant to the space and not just something that's kind of thrown in there. So ideally, I would get more of those, but I can't actually find them anymore. I bought like all of the stock of one of the sellers of them, and then I haven't been able to find them again since. Also, they're not super cheap, so I don't want that many of them. You might notice that my ceiling lights are somewhat unusual. This, again, used to be a garage. So where that little box is up there, that was a fluorescent fixture. It was super ugly. So I took it out and instead used those wires to run into that box, which is actually holding a power supply, and then ran these little LED strips across the whole room. And they go from that point to each corner. Here's the coolest part. I have to turn these off for you to see it. I actually normally leave them off when I'm filming stuff because I don't want weird reflections. But here is the best part of these ceiling lights. When I turn these on, they do this cool chase pattern all the way to the corners, and then they turn white when it's done. Last recent addition to this space has been this air conditioner is my new friend. This air conditioner makes it actually bearable in here, although it is so loud that I can't use it when I'm filming, for example, right now. So I am now very warm, but that air conditioner does its job well, and I will be turning it on as soon as I'm done filming this, which is about now. And also along the lines of the theme of the space, you can see I've got a definite color scheme going on, but I've also painted all of my furniture white. This was a shelf that used to be some ugly gray. These shelves actually used to be a different color. If you look underneath on some of them, there, that's what it used to look like. But I've wrapped them with contact paper so that they actually look a lot brighter. And this pattern matches my table because I use the same contact paper on the table. Same thing, this used to be a table with very dark top and black legs, and I painted everything and I wrapped it in contact paper, and that way it just looks a lot nicer. and matches the space a lot better. And I think that's about it for this tour. Let me know if you have any more questions about the space or if I forgot to mention anything that you saw in the shots. It's been a lot of fun putting this together. Again, it is a slow process. It is not something that happened overnight. I did have an overnight version of it that I had to use very quickly when I had to start teaching from here, but it has grown a lot since then in the last 18 months, and I'm sure it will grow again in the future. In fact, one of the things that I'm now becoming a little bit irritated with is that extra second rack of gear that's on my desk, and I'm thinking I may want to move all of it off of the desk and just get like a floor standing rack unit and just start filling that with stuff. We'll see what happens. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but this is what I've been using for the last several months, so I wanted to capture it and give you a sense of what it's like in here. I hope this gives you some ideas for building your own studios out. I know I always enjoy watching those. I'm gonna be following along with Doug Johnson's new studio build as he's working on his house. I'll leave a link to his channel down below because he's gonna be doing a massive build out from studs in, and that's gonna be a fun project to follow along. We'll see what happens here. I'm probably gonna go through some more changes. I have gear turning over in here quite a bit. I add new things, I take things out of rotation, and it's fun to see how things just evolve over time. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.